Hi, my name is Chuck Schrader, and today we're covering a module from our SK Global and our Treasury Automation Suite, the module called Direct Debit. Many of you may be familiar with our AP/EFT Plus electronic funds module, which is basically sending a file to your bank to initiate payments to your vendor. This is really just the flip side of that. This is sending a file to your bank to initiate a pool of funds from your customers into your bank account. I have a couple of features listed there. Just walk through those real quick, but basically bank-specific formats, we have the formats for your particular bank. If we don't have them already in the library, we can create them from scratch in about 2 weeks once we get a specification from your bank. So basically, we know how to talk to your bank to issue a direct debit type of transaction. Ability to fully automate. We really want to automate the whole round trip. So we're going to, of course, start out by sending a file to your bank to initiate those direct debit transactions, but we also support the reading in of bank response files. If the bank sends an electronic response, we can read that back in and, again, more fully automate the full round trip from the bank. Field validation, you'll see that here in a few minutes, but we basically just want to catch as many errors as early as possible versus catching them at the bank when maybe it's already been through an approval process, been through a journal process. Like to catch the errors as early as possible when you can still have time to fix them before it gets to your bank. And then the email process, again, if you're familiar with our vendor payments, typically on a vendor payment, you're going to send an email to someone after the fact that says, hey, you have money coming to your account on this day. If you're going to pull money from a customer's account, you may want to send that notification ahead of time. So we have what we call advanced emails. We also have the emails after the fact. So basically it's and or. You can choose to have one, both, or neither on. And again, send those emails ahead of time or send them after the fact. Many times in direct debit, you're going to send those ahead of time. So now we're going to step out of the slideshow here and just go into product. Again, I believe I've explained the overall process, but sending a file to your bank to pull money from your customer's account. So if we're going to send a file to the bank, we really need to know what that file looks like ahead of time, which is our format library for direct debit. You'll notice a lot of these formats in here may look familiar from AP/EFT, but just with an AR suffix on them. There are very few formats that actually work for both AP/EFT and direct debit. So you'll see a lot of, again, AR specific ones here that have that AR suffix on them. But USACH, Wells Fargo Payment Manager, are ones that actually work for both directions. They work for vendor payments and AR direct debits. But again, those are the rare exception. Almost all the ISO formats are meant to be either for AP/EFT or direct debit, and they don't support both types of transactions in the same file type. So what we're going to do is we'd normally come in here and work with you and your bank and pick a format up front. Which format are they going to use to initiate these direct debit transactions? And then what type of payment types are you doing within those particular formats? In the intro there, I mentioned the field validation rules. So if I flip through these, you can see these rules change slightly down here because these are built out per payment specification. So a CCD type of direct debit might have different rules than maybe a SEPA type of direct debit. So we have these rules built in, again, to try to catch these errors as soon as possible in the process and not catch them, again, by the bank. We want to catch those while you still can do something about it in the payment journal process. So again, first thing we would do is talk with you and your bank and figure out what file format and what types of payment specifications are going to be used for this direct debit process. The other important question for the bank is, are they going to send us an electronic response back? So if we have a file we're sending to the bank, a lot of times they'll give you several choices as to what to send back. Do you want to get an email response back? If so, someone's going to get that email, has to react to it manually and basically go in and accept or reject things manually based on the response. If we have the response coming back automated, we can basically automate a lot more of the round trip. So let's say I send 100 direct debit transactions in a single file to the bank. If I get 99 accepted ones and 1 rejected ones, we can reach back into the journal and approve the 99, reject the 1, and then post the good ones and transfer the rejected ones to a new journal. And again, that whole round trip can be automated if we're going to electronic response back. So if you are going to do this process with the bank, you might want to ask about ability to get the automated file back versus an email. So we would normally get this, again, this conversation with you and your bank, get this format decided, attach it to a method of payment. And that's really the key piece of the setup. There are a lot of other configuration options as to basically how do you want to run your business, but the main key is what file we're going to send to the bank. So I'm in the payment journal here. There's nothing in it, as you can see right at the moment, but this all starts with the customer payment journal process. Normally, you're probably going to start with the payment proposal. So if you're doing a whole payment proposal, so selecting everyone that you want to direct debit at once, I'm going to date this a few days out. Today is, we'll date this out to grab these in the future. Normally, with direct debit, especially if you're going to send an advanced email, you're not going to send a direct debit out for just today. You'd send it for a couple of days out. So I'll go ahead and click Create Payments. Up to this point, everything in Customer Payment Journal I've shown is standard D365. When I click the Create Payment Journal process there, and before the screen come up, we ran a lot of those customer field validations in the background. And if any of those had reported an error, it would show up in this exception list. I don't have any errors here, so we're good to keep moving forward. And again, I did this via payment proposal. You could have done this just by typing in a single line as well. But the key thing is that there are methods of payment that are tied to direct debit. I'm going to veer off here just slightly to go into the direct debit screen method of payments. But this basically checkbox says that is a direct debit method of payment. And this format checkbox here is what's telling it which format it's tied to. In my case, I'm tied to USACH, but if I was tied to Bank of America or a Danske Bank or whatever, basically this format would change, but everything I'm about to show you, the process-wise, would behave exactly the same. When I get to this step, because there are methods of payments that are tied to direct debit, there's a couple options that show up under functions, which is send file later and send file now. Send file later is going to queue up a file to send to the bank, but it's not going to build it or send it. Typically use that if you have a separation of duties between someone preparing the journal and someone releasing the file to the bank. The send file now is going to do all those steps basically in one step. I'm going to do the send file later just so you can see the separate steps, but again, send file now would do these in one and could be fully automated. So I queued it up to Treasury Automation. So now I'm going to go to the create and send screen. If you had that separation of duties, this is the screen that someone would normally sign in. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this and we should see a new one up here, which we do. So you can see that when it brought over to Treasury Automation, that there is advanced email pending. I had my configuration just set up to say, whenever I send this to Treasury Automation, I right away want to send the advanced email. Again, maybe I'm going to send these over a few days early so that the advanced email goes out in a couple of days before I actually try to pull the transaction from the customer's account. If I refresh this enough times, the advanced email would eventually go to advanced email complete. It does run as a batch job in the background, so it doesn't necessarily hold up the screen. And again, I'm just kind of refreshing this to see if it'll refresh here for me, but we can continue forward whether it gets the advanced email sent out. Normally there'd be some days lapsed in here, but for demo purpose, we're kind of just keep moving along here. I'll try to refresh one more time. Yep, and we can see that the advanced email sent. So the next step would be to actually send the file to the bank. So now we're going to go ahead and send the file. When we pick it, the options defaults to create and send. I'm going to click the begin processing button, and this is what is building the file and sending the file off to the bank. Again, if I had that send now function on that original screen, it would be all the way up to the state right from the send over to Treasury Automation. At this point, I'm waiting for that response back to the bank. And as I mentioned earlier, it's really one of two responses I'm going to normally get, either an email back or an electronic response. In my case, I don't have a real bank listening for these transactions. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this on my own here. But if you had a bank that was sending these back, the step I'm doing right now, this would happen because of the file coming back, and you would not have to come in here and click this. So I have my email set up to go both advanced emails and after the fact, so you can see there's emails pending that are going to go out once this batch job completes. So that basically is the round trip. I sent the file to the bank. I queued it up from the customer payment journal. I got a response back from the bank. In my case, I was simulating an email response. If I was going to get an automated response, that would automatically go through. There is file details here, so I can see what happened after the fact. And again, these advanced emails or emails, I could see these as they were sent out. So you can see one of the emails is already sent out and another one's kind of working on it here. There is one other useful thing about this screen though. Let's say I send this to the bank and the bank accepts the file, especially with like a USACH, which is delayed really a day. It happens on an overnight network. So the bank accepts the file, everything's all good. Maybe a day or two later, I get a response back from the bank that says, hey, when we went to pull this money, that account was closed or whatever. So now I need to reverse that back out. Well, I can do that in D365. It takes a few steps to do. I need to go in customers. I need to go in transactions. I need to unsettle. Then I need to go in customer payment journal, create a reversing transaction, and then settle the original payment out with that. So I could do all those steps, or I could click reverse posted payment. I could either agree or change the date and click reverse again. And it really is doing all those steps I just mentioned all in one step. So if you have that situation where you're sending a file to the bank approves it, you go ahead and post everything, and now 2 days later, the bank tells you that, hey, the direct debit failed because of a bad account number. This allows you to undo that very, very quickly. So that's really, again, that's really the whole round trip with a reversal. So we started out in customer payment journal, sent it, we released it from the create and send screen, and then we simulated getting a email response back to complete it. And then we further simulated getting a notification from the bank several days later that says we need to reverse out the transaction, and we did that with a couple clicks. So hopefully this gives you a high-level overview of the direct debit process. If you need further information or want to ask further questions, sales@sksoft.com is the best place to start, and we'll get back to you with a response. So thank you for your time and attention today, and I hope this was helpful. Thank you.